This isn't your typical scary story, but I promise it's worth a listen. I was 2 years out of undergrad when the whole thing started. While I was technically getting an online graduate certificate at the same school I had obtained my bachelor's at, I still had a ton of free time on my hands. During that period of my life, I was jumping around from odd job to odd job, looking for any old gig to fill the hours and help me stack some cash. Let's just say Indeed was my best friend at the time. I honestly found 90% of my leads from that one website alone. I was getting tired of door dashing around the same 6 neighborhoods for minimum wage, so I decided a change of pace was in order. As I was browsing Indeed later that night, I stumbled upon something intriguing. It was a private lifeguarding job at a hotel a few towns over. I know that doesn't sound that abnormal by itself, but there were a couple of strange details in that listing that gave me pause. First of all, the hours were backward, like they weren't normal pool hours. You'd expect a typical hotel pool to open sometime in the morning and close sometime in the evening, with maybe a few hours of downtime in the middle of the day, right? Well, this was the opposite, damn near exactly. They wanted someone to operate and supervise a swimming pool from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. during the week. It was basically a night shift for a pool. That wasn't the strangest thing, though. The requirements explicitly requested an individual who didn't speak Spanish. Let me repeat that. They specifically wanted someone who didn't speak Spanish. Here was the problem. I've been speaking Spanish since I was a little kid. I'm literally half Mexican. The town the hotel was based in was predominantly populated by Spanish-speaking Americans too, so that requirement didn't make much sense to me. In fact, nothing about the listing made sense to me. I remember being beyond perplexed when combing through it. There was one thing I was feeling pretty good about though, $30 an hour, which would probably be something like $50 in today's inflation-adjusted economy. I don't really know if that's true, but the point is, $30 an hour back then was like stubbing your toe on a gold bar. Safe to say, I disregarded all the other nonsense and decided to focus my attention on the compensation. I decided that I'd just pretend not to know Spanish. What were they going to do? The gig must have been either brand new or in really low demand, because I heard back and was actually invited to interview within a few hours. Fast forward to the first day, I pull up to the hotel, and everything looks exactly how you'd expect. This pudgy Mexican-looking dude comes out to greet me, and the two of us exchange information and have a laugh. He was actually really friendly and pretty funny too, and his amiable demeanor put me at ease a little. But as we were walking into the complex, this other, taller guy turned a corner and started staring me down. I could tell right away that I was being profiled, and I started wondering whether having the first person to greet me behave so unimposingly was a ploy to get me to lower my guard. The second guy walked right up to me and started communicating with me in Spanish. He didn't smile, didn't say hello, shake my hand, nothing. I instantly knew what he was doing. He was trying to gauge whether or not I knew Spanish, so the listing hadn't been BS. I gave him a blank stare, even though I understood every word. He wasn't saying anything crazy, by the way. He was just rambling about the weather or something. It wasn't important enough to remember. After a few seconds, I turned to the first guy, who turned to the taller guy, and then the two of them burst out laughing, like they had both been in on some practical joke. The taller guy flashed a smile, outstretched his hand, and said he was just messing with me. I went along with it, but I was a little weirded out. He introduced himself as Jefe, and the bigger guy as Esteban. The three of us walked through the complex to get to the pool, and the taller guy, who I assumed was the one in charge, started talking me through the job. According to him, they needed someone to work later hours because they wanted to increase revenue, and they were going to start charging non-guests just to use the pool. I didn't even know if that was legal, but I wasn't about to start complaining. I was told they wanted someone who didn't speak Spanish because it would prevent rowdy outsiders from trying to harass me, which I didn't fully understand, but went along with it anyway. My responsibilities were as follows. Lifeguard, obviously, collect money from non-guests trying to enter the pool, and call Jefe if there was any sort of problem. And there was one more thing. Jefe told me that if anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to let them into what he called the pool house, which was a huge building behind the lifeguard stand. I didn't ask questions. The first week was really chill. The first few weeks, actually. A lot more people used the pool than I was expecting, so I had my work cut out for me. I collected money from outsiders and kept an eye out. No one showed me a wristband. The first time someone did show me a wristband was about a month in. On some random day, this buff Hispanic guy in shades and a white button-down shirt walked up to me, clearly not knowing a lick of English. He showed me his wristband, and I unlocked the pool house. About an hour later, he emerged and began walking towards the exit gate. The pool house door locked automatically, so I didn't have to interact with him or get down again, but I watched him leave. His backpack looked significantly more full than it had when he arrived, but other than that, everything was normal. Over the next few weeks, more and more people started showing me wristbands, and a lot of them started showing up together. More and more non-guests started using the pool too, because I began collecting a lot more money than I ever had. At one point, I realized I was actually collecting too much money, like people entering the pool would overpay me by a crazy amount on a consistent basis. I called Jefe about it, and he told me not to worry, saying that people made mistakes all the time. I could tell he didn't want to talk about it more than he had to, because he hung up the phone while I was mid-sentence. Amidst everything fishy that was going on, that short, harmless phone call confirmed to me that I was involved in something more than just lifeguarding a swimming pool. Only after hanging up the phone did the true gravity of the situation hit me. My mind started smothering all the noise until there was a single thought I couldn't purge from my brain: money laundering. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, my intuition was telling me I was involved in something illegal and should get out of there immediately, but on the other hand, I had no safe way of confirming that suspicion and didn't want to forfeit $30 an hour over nothing, so I kept my mouth shut and kept the job. After that moment, though, I started piecing everything together. The pool house, or the building I'd been told was a pool house, was clearly where the shady stuff went on. Illegal gambling, drug trafficking, something worse, whatever it was happening right behind me every single day, obstructed from view by only a single locked door. Patrons of the pool started getting more friendly with me, especially the wristband wearers. Strangers began learning my name, and I went from solely collecting money to collecting tips, high fives, and greetings too. As people got more comfortable with me, they started talking in front of me. I'd catch pieces of their conversation in Spanish, and let's just say all my suspicions were confirmed. Admittedly, the added benefits made overlooking everything else much easier. Plus, my hands were clean. I was being employed to perform a job, which was exactly what I was doing. Speaking of the job, I actually had to rescue a drowning child a few days later. It wasn't anything overly heroic, just a kid who strayed too far into the deep and clearly couldn't swim. But when I returned to the surface of the pool, everyone gave me a standing ovation. It was a really unique feeling. After that, Jefe actually came down from wherever in the hotel he had been and thanked me personally for doing such a good job lifeguarding. He said he owed me his life, which I didn't understand until I realized the kid I saved was actually his son. The next day, Jefe, Esteban, and a bunch of other dudes, some of whom I recognized as wristband wearers, were all waiting at the gate to greet me with a glass of wine. That obviously felt great, but the good feeling didn't last. After everyone toasted me, one of the men made a toast in Spanish. I don't remember what was said verbatim, but it was not a pleasant speech. He was basically toasting all the money they were making and all the, quote, lives they were destroying, whatever that meant. Everyone laughed and drank, but that was the moment that made me realize I had gotten addicted to something seriously insidious. No amount of money and tips should have justified me staying at that hotel that long, and yet, regrettably, I had. The next day, my mom called me while I was at the pool. I'm not going to get into it, but my mom, rest her soul, never called me unless it was something really important, so I had to answer. I got down from my stand and went over to what I thought was a private little alcove so I could have some privacy. My mom only ever spoke Spanish, so naturally I had to talk to her in Spanish. I don't remember what she called me about. What I do remember is that after hanging up and turning to head back to the pool, Esteban was standing directly in my path, staring at me. He did not look like that same friendly guy I had met on my first day at the pool. After a really awkward pause, he asked how long I knew Spanish. I played dumb, saying I was just practicing it with a friend and wanted to learn, but I knew he saw right through me. He just kept staring at me like he was contemplating something. My heart started racing, and I felt like he was debating whether or not to harm me. Eventually, he just said, okay, and turned around. and I immediately went right back to my post. I debated leaving, but couldn't force myself out of the chair. They might have taken that as a sign of guilt. I could have been failing a test. They probably knew where I lived. Those were all thoughts racing through my mind as I prayed for my life, frozen to that chair. A few minutes before my shift ended, Hefe came up to me and told me to arrive an hour early the following day, as he'd have a new opportunity to offer me. Then he tipped me a couple $100 and walked back into the hotel. When I left the hotel that day, I never returned. No way. That situation had no good ending. I don't think I was ever followed home, but for months after that I was a paranoid wreck. Every van or suspicious-looking car on my street freaked me out, and there were nights where I just stayed awake for hours, thinking about the situation. Even after all these years, there are things about it I don't understand. They were obviously moving drugs, I get that, but why they'd even need me at all was something I never understood. My best guess was that they just needed someone on payroll who could act like a clueless employee if the cops ever stopped by. Who knows? I still think I was really close to losing my life that day, as unlikely as that may seem to anyone hearing this. But I'm telling you, the way Esteban was glaring at me, there was one thing on his mind, and one thing only.